Hello, species. Balloon theory is about how the value of the identity of the ground is attached to our active quality of fact nature, is a gaining value of forever nature. And this is with and to teach the Trinity. This is another version of volume theory. I guess I didn't know volume theory was one associated with the Big Bang. And that they had that phrase for someone else. That's another theory that mine associated with this algebraic consciousness, which is volume theory, where forever nature is a gaining nature of volume, even when it's going negative, because it's using that. And see, the nature of identity is nature of volume, not only in nature of volume, but it's self-generating. There are proofs that I never saw human cells under a microscope, but I saw a transverse section of tomato cells. Under a microscope, you have the nucleus, the cell body, cell wall. And that's all we ever been taught about cells in general. So there's this pattern, the Trinity, this Trinity. Even though that's distinct from and not distinct from what simultaneously not distinct from. Also, with the Trinity, Jesus Christ is only one part of the Trinity. No, the whole Holy Ghost. In other words, that's about a conversation with science that is also connected to the organized crime and how the sciences, so human fact treatment nature was already conformed to criminal insidiousness nature. Treatments of positive that couldn't defend that and sustain themselves or even stand someone with free speech is simultaneously inherent, active, and progressive means. It was sequenced true. Because this is how forever nature has a relationship to itself. The rest of nature has no criminal foreign influences. Humanity does. Lethal Hadiths, our values going from here. The phenomenon of us being closer to the greatest um, nature of volume that's inherent. Whereas in all the parts of space have parts of it grouped individually all together and grouped in all together. The identity of that is gaining value, positive or negative, in relationship to Earth, as Earth's simultaneously distinct and non-distinct relationship to the rest of space. See, we have to be that extra 5. For example, in 3 years is 1,095 days. By being that value here in our range is of the Trinity, as our relationship to its forced value here, increase here, or forced from here. See, we're in an identity of negative value nature valuing that because of our identity of the relationship to the ground, to the identity of the value filling here as what is forced from here, or is what really reveals evolutionist fruits and gifts. But it uses the identity of the ground, the identity of relationship to nature that it is means. See, this is what Native Americans they can't figure out how to word, because everyone's talking about capitalism, things, contract. There was never free market. It was, never free speech, but to a quality that was maintained and bridged, not by our founders. That involves a whole bunch of child abuse methods, roles, engineered valuing it. Originally still, don't think each age, not by accident. That's maintained, exploited by methods that everyone missed because no one's following mandated law. Because this uses the identity of every identity there is, of every identity of the ground location, all gathered around. The native dreams don't hurt, but when denied, one truth alone is native pure, and where fact treatment natures rise, who trial tribes. Adam is the subject and Eve is the verb, and all parts are temporary positive, and then they are as temporary slash lasting positive or negative, as temporary positive as criminal insidiousness or not. The rest of nature is not criminal insidious nature or positive, as fact treatment nature. Ours is now hyper identity of negative value nature regression, value nature system, earth simultaneously distinct and non-distinct, positive also further positive onto itself here, being forced from here, and that's self-value. For all kinds of logistical reasons, these are not by accident, because we're in value nature systems, not by accident, tactically ulterior from the one that causes evolution. So before anyone, even the colonists were born, before Native Americans were already divided, before our founders were born, there was already entrenched here other nations, but as identities that were forced to entertain and to value systems grouped, and not to speak about that. The ancient internation sciences became criminally engineered, a gang. That identity is connected to what through time in interstates recorded and confessed most furthered and used criminally the overt criminal enterprises are the various interbranch family members, all private tied to them, especially prisons, on and off the state prison office buildings, on and off the state judicial branch buildings, involved with database crimes, involved with sequence shifts. We have all kinds of originally and still, we have interbranch using that to hide their criminally foreign influence fact treatments when it comes to what was an organized crime that used color. And they use it right now when they speak, because they're victim predators, not letting understood, worse than obfuscating, how there were those same laws against everyone. And they put the color in there and maintain that sickly distinctly so they could make now we wouldn't be able to have the quality of fact treatment nature to counter the criminal insidious natures at the level of control where opposed to war there's still qualities of mental logic experts with badges and with guns and all inclusion with that, and negotiating with a whole bunch of nations originally still with physical roles with a criminality that is not, there's all victim roles with it forced. How? From off the ground of education's value, sustained on and off campuses and layers. Needs for pseudo positive, all victim predator reactions to fact treatment nature maintained, needed, because we have the branches of government needing to maintain lie progressions, meaning needing to maintain standing lie progression, cover up nature, sequence shifting nature, criminal uses of database racket roles that they don't understand, but they do to only through extents that they have to hide their own lies and criminal uses. Everyone's this is where everyone's distinctly, sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly. Everyone's hurt by the same thing as frustrated reactions. But this is specifically where they were talking about fact treatment nature. There's no one in the world who was, and we're showing this theater with, for example, when they take color, and we think, and we see, okay, people seem passionate, But in the background, they're just doing that because everyone's victim predators trained to this left on this maintained everyone manifest self-valuing what you can't self-value and and not value what not simultaneously be valuing the real causes of negative value nature progressions acts and natures blamed by other things other than selves. And that can't counter what exploits here and there all the negative, what they call business, what they call value, what they call positive treatments, what they call sequent treatment with justifications. For example, these are people pretending to be against recidivism, pretending to be against murder by wanting to institute death penalty, things like that. All they need is to hide life progressions, and because they're how they're child abused, they're recorded originally. Still, they're shock and awe weapons, breaching screens and breaching tools. We must not stay these fools. The forgiveness was for this because the quality of fact, human nature, the value of the campus Marcius is everywhere, positive or negative. One identity. The identity of algebra transferred the value of parts of space as its identity nature of volume away from its to greater parts, and that self generate that made the other two parts less valuable, more value another way to the semi nature of a little bit more of identity of the perfect value progression coming into and through temporary / lasting forever nature. So this is balloon theory. This is also where the letters of English have individual grouped and together they have value of identity of volume relationship that is increasing every time we make a word. The value of each language isn't is they these are sounds that were revealed with an identity of relationships to themselves, with an identity of relationship to the ground, individually, grouped, and together. There are proofs that we need another nature statutes to counter what, for example, this is what witch trials too. See, they have they have the people associated with these gangs in these prisons training the jobs of it really young with the kids because they have the grammar schools, the identities of each position of job, each position of time treatment in relationship to what exploits undercover, right to lie that was originally still valued by naive reactions, forced only let be realized because no one's understanding all that tied to perpetually exploit our identity of the native ground, the identity that is positive also unto itself, the one that's native pure, no matter who you are. I'm not Native American, like, but we are the species nature of volume, and it's native pure. The reason when their rights, their identity of relationship to nature and me, it's to reach out, but as everyone to grab its means to heal the tactically denatured relationship to nature, let alone. And then with our founders, which makes it too, just proofs of it. They didn't have free speech. See, we have to have mandated law followed to do that. We have no obligations to agree with the physical delusions, inter sciences and inter industries, in other words, we have behavior crimes, all kinds of. We have the direct former director of the FBI is associated with a whole bunch of people directly and indirectly facilitated the criminal uses of houses in my area. With and as someone that was brought into my house grade in fourth grade after, and then used for criminal uses of confessions from interbranch family members associated with. Don't forget, there are streams of people going to courts each day, but this is not natural. This is a maintained outcome, and there are innocent people going there too every day, and the whole time, even people that are guilty, they're having other things attached to them, and then they're making a whole bunch of other people value nature of law that would just calls other people's names, pretends mental integrity with psychological terms and like delusions, but they're delusions wrong. They're forging names and switching names. These are various natures of foreign and domestic police forms, medical families associated already criminally with our courts, with all kinds of crime methods they have, with all kinds of criminal uses of fake news, identity thefts, because they have to hide life progressions, personal, criminal, individual, and grouped. Other agencies as well pretend they had conversation with anyone in life about things. These are people with spreading lies, for stealing the identities of the relatives of plaintiffs because they got caught, like with a whole bunch of federal criminals associate crimes with kids with each of the campuses I went to in life. These are now adults involved with crimes, roles with database crimes of all juxtaposed natures on and off the campuses. This is how they're using the campuses' identities criminally and stacking names, forging and switching, and no means to counter. They have even they have the online insulated. There's no one, then people retire. This person dies. You know, I never wrote a letter to Mister what's his name, but that's regardless because that's tied to untimely deaths that have ties to what brought up child offenders. Now these are a whole bunch of women in a Leahy family through time, and with a people with the name Brendan Leahy in their family, more than one, and with brothers of one of them. And a whole bunch of them involved criminally with houses around the Samuel Dix house, with people on Church Street, with crimes with intercampuses and with drugs and with the policing of the stores involved criminal uses of interbranch kids for crimes, federal crimes with overt criminal enterprises through time, and a crime method exploiting that through time. Each age of fact treatment nature, maintaining that as pseudo positive, only let heard voice, criminal seriousness nature positive. I'm not a lawyer, not police form, not a criminal. It was recorded how lawyers are defending types of law and types of law treatments that are being used, in other words, criminally to for where types of experts are being used to make things up, not to prevent people from countering how they've been attaching even people since they were kids to fake locations, fake conversations, what methods they've been using to make the like little tricks to make people pretend other, but they would never ever pretend other because it would show what is actually recorded, which is criminal uses of each age of fact treatment nature. Right through our branches, originally and still, maintain criminally foreign influence. Roles having to do sick, crazy things like witch trials, for example, in the past, real or made up, tied to what is maintained on and off campuses, collusion with the overt criminal enterprises, and what puts them away at the same time, specifically for the fact treatment nature, fake difference, cover up, crime roll with that. This is where we're being exploited, where we worse than negotiated with terrorism originally and still. Each modern nation not allowed to talk about the shared policing to hundreds of nations, sick knaves together. So everyone just says blame it on England. And then England is all overextended. They're forced to be knaves too. Everyone's equality of fact in nature, individual, grouped, and all each modern nation is an identity of negative value nature progression, blaming other things, others, and themselves for what everyone's all to, what is an extent of positive only let be free speech if it's going to be as criminal as ceaseless nature. And that's self-valued because of a breaching organized crime. All we have to do is admit and understand this. Excuse me. You have to. This is a method that has people. This is from intercampuses. A whole bunch of manifests. So we need to have countered how we have a whole bunch of nations pretending to be against what they do. They're recording things, they're communicating things, and pretending they're saying other because they know they're saying that because they're communicating that they're criminally foreign influence, states and areas branches. They're communicating in misprision and they're lying each of the people because they're originally still self-value how they're criminal foreign influence. They're using statutes where it says we can't sue the government to prevent us from countering where we can and how. They're recorded, confessed, and demonstrated crime rolls leading up to and in a 2006 case with a whole bunch of people associated criminally with that case, with a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, with federal criminals of his, and with their family members, and his lawyer involved with Farmington Avenue, and police forms associated with near his office there, Robert Chevrolet. Now these are people associated with a John Mayano and people from on and off CCSU, on and off Trinity College, facilitated to identity theft, all natures of federal crimes, verbal and such, and sequence shifts. Sequence shifts is what is worst involved because they're making sequence shift styles. There may be people in the background preventing mandated law because we have many. This also because of how we have the women leaders involved with child offenders. This is because there are criminal uses of the departments at the campuses. There are criminal uses of how they maintain that originally. Still, victims all stand in criminal seriousness nature reactions to off campuses, and then on off campuses in layers maintain sustained uses of the identities of the ground, like especially with the campuses per their relationship to the rest of nature, forced by what revealed that true. See, that was revealed true in ancient times that then became criminally foreign influenced, incapable of defending what they call science and positive, and telling about that at the same time. Then the messengers of modern religions came to demonstrate this to us in semi-ancient times. Then modern nations came. Then is now. And we're in an identity of negative value nature progression, still not valuing the nature of volume we are. Nature is identity's volume that is self-generating. So this is ground theory. It took away from the ground's value. It's the complete identity that is simultaneously distinctly and non-distinctly onto all parts of space nature at once. And it's only as a semi-nature of itself, as the only one that is also positive always onto itself, as a semi-nature, that is the one that is bigger than and smaller than, partially smaller than all the smallest things, and at the same time. And that makes and reveals and keeps wherever when we look out at space. For example, we're seeing a subsection of a complete identity's complete relationship to itself. The value of a semi-nature is the complete nature relationship to itself as and with the phenomena of a semi-nature of itself a little bit more unceasingly of a perfect semi-nature of itself coming into as a perfect identity of relationship to itself, coming into it as the value of space, and no are individually distinct from the rest of space nature, and right where the sun is. In other words, if you add five, well, so in other words, the identity we'll examine this because identity nature fills instantly, but that is also simultaneously partially while we are still a quality of diffusion. While part of its identity is still part of our identity, still generating more value as forever nature, positive or negative. Whereas an unceasing nature of volume because of how one is unto itself. Again, note the rest of nature has no criminal foreign influence, especially once legalized. This is what really facilitates and furthers the overt criminal enterprises. This is what really facilitates and furthers identities of jobs that are only capable of defending themselves if they rely upon sensibilities that having to respect from off campuses directors, leaders of the military and such, associated with intercampuses, foreign and domestic families associated with it, with identity negotiation relationships for stability, whereas that's in relationship to the organized crime method that had that involved with our fact-achieving nature with slavery. In other words, we have to have a discernment of what is positive, true always, and as all exceptions, and not having exceptions denied to heal what never had free speech of that integrity heard. And we have to do it without blaming on people, things and stuff. And this means we have to be able to counter who's offensively interbranch pretending things about our behavior, which is recorded, and their motivations to it, or how various natures of courts. There's a I barely know him. Jeremy Grohl. I'm sorry, I have to use your name. And a suburb Bajero. A whole bunch of people associated. I barely know them. I never had a class with them. They're recorded confessed with a whole bunch of police forms, foreign and domestic, with downtown Hartford, with crimes with FBI, with foreign and domestic families, with overt criminal enterprises, with crimes with prison cliques, with kids, courts with kids, and courts with elderly. These are people with elderly homes. These are time treatments of jobs where they're keeping victim predators of all type of person. And this is subsequent to and as the value of what is preventing our means to have mandated laws value as anything but a weapon used by states originally, still way worse than witch trials. Imagine that's one. See, this is how this is important because of how the branches are criminally involved with sequence shift rackets, with identity theft rackets, with value rackets. In other words, from off campuses, we have FBI facilitating people, and from facilitated Facebook to all natures of property thefts, crimes, for example. These are also people recorded, confessed, and demonstrated they have. I read about it. They have, and I swear to God, under oath, I have no doctor of psychology, anything like that. And this Dr. Leahy and the women in his family, and the men there's his kids and his brothers. They're involved with child offenders further with a whole bunch of juxtaposed natures of crimes with kids. And with each age of fact achieving nature, various natures of courts are confessed, recorded, and demonstrated criminally involved with him and with retired and standing mayors and judges. people involved on and off the state judicial branch offices criminally, and with Enzo Fienza, he's recorded confessed with his family and with people associated with the houses around and other people on and off the state judicial branch offices involved with identity theft crime act, sequence shift crime act roles, acting crime act roles with areas that were tied to their pretended illusions that they used for crime methods and acts and cases, including a proven sequence shift from inside the Ninth Circuit in Manhattan right before the Trade Center attack, right next to it. Post-dated documents were proven to have been affected from inside the case to show the court to show the judges post-dated, to have them rule they were filed late. But it was later proven that they had been hand delivered and time stamped on time in the Ninth Circuit, Manhattan. And that proven led to a 2006 case in Connecticut, a district court case in Manhattan. I mean, in New Haven, which is recorded confessed involved with a whole bunch of people from my town invested through time. And then, in other words, facilitated the crime acts roles with all the way up from former director of the FBI down. Now there are people associated with the Lowe's and with Home Depot, and with the training of security of places. There are people with Corone brothers. I don't know their parents' names, but we have men and women involved with that. Also involved with Department of Transportation, policing forms and stuff like that on and off these low campus locations, on and off those locations near the waters and things like that. And see, we have less bad things, but we have crazy things happen in Weathersfield through time too that all have connections to the same people involved with, as what's intercampuses involved with the problems that are sustained with no free speech let the counter and with the identity thefts of Hartford, Connecticut, especially with their shootings of New Haven. See, they have the FBI there. They have the standing relationships to the pathology that was handed down by our founders to have demonstrated. We have zoning laws. We have the pathology. We have our social relations. We have Facebook is recorded and confessed involved way worse than Monopoly, which they don't have to stay that way. They just have to, why they take positions about behavior, they're sequence shifting though. So they're not letting resolutions because the court, these are people involved with Facebook, with courts, with women judges, forging names, switching names, crime rolls, the identity of the ground crime rolls, because every time they're attaching me and other people to fake locations, fake relationships to others, sticking all kinds of sick lies and things into databases. These are people further tied from Connecticut into branch crimes of all natures against each age of fact sheeting nature, as the people deciding things. This is how they were raised to be victim predators. That identity is confessed and recorded, involved with database crimes associated with drug crimes associated with them. They're the ones with the best drugs still. Like, in other words, like for marijuana. And then they're pretending they have the integrity to deal with these things. These are people with criminal uses of of these of the reactions of each age when with them dealing through them, and with the qualities of it used for fact cheaping nature racket. That's also a racket on each age of fact cheaping nature that everyone missed, and how it made everyone self value it because everyone's valuing correlation nature simultaneously, sequence true, inherent, active, and progressive means an identity not stolen. They're forcing quality of fact cheaping nature. They already used the identities of the locations of each nature of court, of each campus, and each person's value tied to their decisions criminally. They also they already hid lie progressions with that. They already hid how quality of fact, GB nature, conviction nature roles. You can't defend that and us at the same time. You, American history is about that nature of liar. That's also pretending to be about justice. Worse than obfuscating the nature of the law, how it has to discern from what is truly positive, always not denying exceptions, not exploiting them being accepted. So with valuing, with transferring from legal to non-legal marijuana, obligations the whole time to reveal how cruel and unjust punishment, especially from a tactically denatured relationship to nature and means base, then they, forget about it. Science never spoke for Hartford, Connecticut. Packed on that. We only people lost their lives. They should have never had a chance. At the same time, tortured, worse. We're going to have logic's course here. I'm going to teach you how to think. This is about algebra's identity. This is a self-generating nature of volume as Earth simultaneously distinct and non-distinct relationship to itself. As we have an identity that is distinctly and non-distinctly onto all parts of ourselves in demonstration of this. But none will hear because of how the identity of the ground is tied to our fact treatment nature and how they have that each age of fact treatment nature. This is how they have the simultaneously connected already. They already had that value. No one, everyone was Oz. And that's why and how it's tied to why and how no one lets demonstrated how we have sick fakes that are preventing free speech from demonstrating how you could demonstrate and see how everyone was liars originally and still when it comes to color. And they're offensively pretending other because they're valuing sensibilities of everyone dishonestly. Because they're using every identity of the ground location as a weapon. That's what they're raising both parties as. That's what they're already invested fact treatment nature value systems as. Victim predators. All we have to do is admit the identity of the ground, all value treatments forsaken, and let alone the actually forsaken. Then we force evolution, the identity of relationship to nature. We have means to make we have to stretch out for the compost. We have to counter what is unfathomable. The only way we can do it is the whole species at once. So we have to use the species coach. I'll be no dunce. We have to set platforms, and we have to reach. In other words, instead of everyone reaching for mountains, which nations will do, groups and nations will do as this identity, not the species value. If we can get all the rock, we can make a. In other words, we can make a movement that counters the tactically denatured relationship to nature. Where we have to have show fact treatment nature how they are incapable of speaking, and by the ones telling us where we were incapable of it. We have to be able to counter how they're not letting us have free speech per their crime methods. These are courts systemically long, originally and still line progression roles with the other branches individually grouped together criminally enabling this. So they have no judicial independence originally and still because of how they were child abused. This is another nature of child abuse. This is, in other words, worse than criminal incompetence with and as our organized crime countering bodies, worse than in collusion with the organized crime method against everyone with torture and with the slavery of our founders, the fact treating nature slavery of our founders, the stolen identities of our founders, of each identity of the ground's identity of relationship to our fact treating nature. This one way is native pure alone. It's where exception natures have a relationship to the subject and the predicate, and or the predicate alone as value nature. Run. Each science lied too long. Boxing is fun. See, but they're using the identity of the ground. These are also a whole bunch of nations. Our police forms and judges recorded, confessed, and demonstrated database crime rules. Crime is pretending people. I had conversations with people pretending people were following them. The same people forging names and switching names, fake conversations, identity theft, crime acts, drug crime rolls, overt gangs, and private drug crime rolls. The same people, all kinds of federal evidence crime rolls, database crime rolls, criminal uses of the grounds. Forget about it. The identity of the each group of legal nature, legal identity. You can't defend that and what they're already involved with. Not by accident. Legion train. So this is what we do. We play one game. If we can make one this with this, I know how we can do it because we have to make you have to realize identity of the ground positions that are identity of our relationship to our quality of fact shaping nature that can counter what is easy maintenance to everyone as knave and then self-defended knave pseudo positive and rules with voice only lets hear pseudo positive. It is a trick to you each interbranch, especially young leaders. They want to invest you to pseudo positive roles with them. Criminal uses of exceptions, criminal uses of sequence shifts, criminal uses of the right to lie written in the law by criminal uses of exceptions with that. Originally, still, and this is why it's important to understand how they were child abused. I'm not trying to call them names. I'm trying to demonstrate since everyone was in grammar school, there was the basic identity of the ground, relationship to our quality of fact, human nature, distinctions that we are criminally not being allowed to voice, and they're torturing us and stealing our identities if we try to say it. They're using sick fact treatment nature rackets. They're using how they have criminal justice for intercampuses and systems like that, say state streams, foreign and domestic families, state shared policing, interbranch, trade center, Washington D.C., other nations equivalents, shared policing of what? Care for each other, their people there, our kids there. This is worse than negotiated with terrorism. We're fact cheating nature rackets. You can't defend that in our areas from what is more criminally involved with these young kids with the shootings than they are even when they pull the trigger. Of course, they want to bring back the death penalty. They need to keep everyone with the roles hiding their lie tools, hiding their lies, lie progressions, lie progression cover up natures from what is really the problem. The problem is also recorded how they're using women indifferent to crime rules with this in the background pretending they don't realize other people lied to them their crime methods. Then once that's why they put crime. That's why we have rules they don't follow. There are all kinds of crime rules juxtaposed with their federal crime rules, like predicate acts, mail crimes, forging names, switching names, falsified police reports, crimes with child sex offenders, force sustained, and they're force sustained further, criminal using more that were further criminally involved with that. And they're mixing the names. They have a KNERR, a tie with a KERR family, and with Officer Milner, further confessed and recorded, involved with the rest. And then there's a Phil Cololo and our people with fake news with interbranch sources of WFSB and Fox Connecticut News long already facilitated the crime acts roles with this, and then before that they were facilitated leading up to when in the Trade Center attack. Crime acts roles with the people associated with that context criminally tied to a proven sequence shift from inside the Ninth Circuit. Worse was acted from in there, and and tied to a whole bunch of ways to a Scalora family and a whole bunch of people with Fox Connecticut with media crime roles with criminal uses of them per the FBI, all the way up from former director of the FBI into branch police families, family members associated with the courts and their police, and then with on off campuses relationships. And they already use cases criminally through time. They already use all the jails and on off the jail offices involved with database crime. They have those people involved with identity theft rackets, with database crimes, also tied to as sequence shift rackets, maintaining all valuing sequence shift roles with the identity thefts. That maintains all inherent active and progressive fact treatments as criminal serious nature on a mass scale, shared, filtered through, and has other motivations, natures, needs, and interests, but all as like wrongdoers, mass scale. Justification natures of that. You can't defend that. Treatments of fake positive, and also at the same time. I just remind. So this is also going to be about this is the devil is about an organized crime method using human fact treatment nature. These are also people recorded a whole bunch of nations with psychology with pretended conspiracy theories. And they're attaching little kids to fake locations and to fake sequences in relationship to crime methods done through each age. And then that's tied to them doing crime acts in cases. And when bad things happen with the narratives of it, invested to further illusions that they're using for other natures of federal crimes. In relationship to what stays the federal crime method that is sustained fake care and consciously evil, fake righteous justice, aggression, and worse upon each area sickly distinctly and sickly non-distinctly too. And that was it was so sickly distinctly, specifically for what is using consciously the most forsaken as for fact treatment nature tools to perpetually originally and still allow American history told. How Weathersfield, Connecticut slash in Hartford, Connecticut, how they are and have been sickly distinctly used by a breaching organized crime method that George Washington had to leave avert slavery with color in relationship to here right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War meeting at the in this town. And with still a whole bunch of houses associated with Church Street right around the corner from it, and with places there involved with agencies, foreign and domestic, overt criminal enterprises, and various natures of judges and people on and off the state judicial branch offices, on and off the state prison offices, with crimes with databases together, identity thefts, sequence shifts, uses of whole groups. They say all that they make overall allegations against people, as people also that use pretending other at the same time misprising. For example, fake news is real. I'm not saying for the reasons the president are saying. I don't know what his reasons are. I know that fake news is real. They stole my identity. These are the same people from with child defenders with a grammar school I went to. That people when I was in middle school, they made confessions about them, and those people had made confessions and demonstrations of the roles with a former Mayor Gold, his kids, and with two O'Brien family, long time involved with various natures, detectives, things like that, capital investigations, evidence reception predators. roles with crimes with overt criminal enterprises. Now, the same way they are sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly too, with a Joshua Julian and with a Joshua Stryker recorded and confessed involved further crimes with further child offenders on off the schools in Wethersfield of each age, and their uses of the Facebook policing. They use crime methods by forcing people to be counter aggressive and or whatever their reactions are, they criminally exploit that. These are behavioral crime roles with the identity thefts, all the methods and natures of crimes pretended legal interbranch that are not legal. That how they were motivated to that for criminal uses of their family members through time. Then it was exploited with and as their recorded facilitated crime rules with the Trade Center. With the uses of sensibilities of everyone involved with that. Everyone's still originally still preventing what is true always and from and not denying exceptions from having its void free speech here with and as the value gaining and surging through and as the value of each subject and verb alone through all things. Boxing. The identity of algebra. Allah's name was revealed to teach this. Is about a cross section, and there's a nature of prayer. See, but the first part of the Quran and the first part of the Old Testament, here and there, they're not being allowed to be valued properly. Sequence nature is properly not being, because of how we have originally still all valuing fact treatments that came through criminally foreign influence sciences. All victim predator value roles with that. As identities, you can't value that. And what's exploiting that? As science is true identity, which is pure value inflation. But as the one that's going to cause all other systems demonstrated as negative value nature progression roles, acts, natures, lethal IDs, them to be negative value nature to positive value nature progression somewhere else. Vaccines of Santa's elves alone. Come home. It's the campus train. We're playing no game. So if you they're recorded with behavioral crimes, with the interpretation of dispute of when people have differences on Facebook, and then no, they kick people off because and they're also at the same time they were facilitated as these database crime acts roles. These are identity theft crime acts roles because they're making opinions about people and about situations. Facebook is also recorded, confessed, and demonstrated involved with federal criminals, overt criminal enterprises, and with people all the way from former director of the FBI down with criminal uses of their databases, of their roles with property thefts, of their roles with all treatments of time all the way too fast, too slow, criminal, of their crimes with doctors forging names, switching names, crimes with child sex offenders, crimes with their patients and prisoners before they were in their care. You better hear.